this is my first like real YouTube video maybe, but basically I want to start making my podcast also available on YouTube because I find I explain a lot of stuff with my hands. So it can be very helpful for some people. And so, but I don't have all the technology to make it super seamless. So for the time being, I'm just going to be embarrassing and be like, I'm going to record my podcast now or whatever. But yeah, so this video is going to be all about the second house of astrology, my interpretation of it, and sharing some examples so people who are interested in learning more about astrology can really get an understanding of what the second house means and kind of how to work with its energies. So yeah, so I guess now I'm gonna do this thing. If I can also record my podcast at the same time. So the second house is traditionally ruled by, actually no, let me start off by saying I have recently learned that in Hellenistic astrology, the houses were kind of their own, were their own model, and in modern astrology, we have begun to work with the houses paired with a specific sign. So Aries, the first sign in the zodiac cycle, is paired with the first house and rules the first house, and Taurus rules the second house, and so on. And it kind of goes through this thing. I've just recently learned that that's a modern astrology thing. So when studying Hellenistic astrology, like I'm in the middle of taking Chris Brennan's course right now on Hellenistic astrology and reading his book, which is right here. It's humongous. It's actually like the prettiest book ever. But yeah, so if you were to look at Hellenistic astrologers' work, they might not take the exact take that I'm having when I'm recording this. But I find that using signs to help understand the houses is really beneficial and kind of kills two birds with one stone, because you're learning like the basic energies of both the sign and the house, although it is important to kind of view them as separate things in certain instances. But by understanding them in the way that I'm teaching in my houses of astrology kind of series that I'm doing, it's really beneficial, because then you get to know both of them, but like you start to see the connections and patterns in astrology, which is what astrology is all about. And yeah, so you'll get that as you kind of watch all the videos or listen to all the podcasts in this series as they get put out and kind of develop. But yeah, so the second house traditionally is the house that represents finances, money, finances, material kind of things. But in modern astrology, it's the same thing, similar in modern astrology, but in modern astrology we pair it with being ruled by the zodiac sign of Taurus. So Taurus and the second house, therefore, are ruled by these things: money, finances, but Taurus is an earth sign, so it brings to us this information of the second house representing the overall theme of stability, sustainability. So sometimes the second house, when things are hit, like when Uranus moves through a transit in Taurus, it usually represents a change in financial cycles or agricultural revolutions, and really like working with things that sustain us as a community, as a whole, as a person, depending on what transit is going through the second house. So although it can have real connections to your personal finances, your home finances, your like the money you acquire from jobs, it also has to do with this overall theme of sustainability. So like the food that you eat, what sustains you. Sometimes it can edge on like your kind of core beliefs that sustain you, depending on your own certain circumstances. Like if you believe so much in veganism, or if you start to have that belief, that would be something that kind of like would come up in a second house transit. Another thing relating to the second house, often because we get the energy from Taurus, is this, again, this other side to this sustainable, or what was the first word I used? something. This other theme that goes to comfortable, like needing things that are stable, but things that make you feel good and comforted. But so like having a car that's efficient and looks nice and is easy to clean, or like making sure you have all the appliances for your house. One Taurus I know has like the nicest kitchen, and maybe a few Tauruses I know have really nice kitchens. So it's the energy of that, this nice kitchen theme can tell us about the second house is organized space for us to live in, for us to be productive in, and for us to feel good in, and like create yummy food that makes us feel good, because Taurus is ruled by Venus, and Venus is about feeling this goodness and feeling pleasure, not just sexual pleasure. Like Taurus kind of brings on this like this pleasure of things like food and taste and sensual things, like having really soft cozy blankets that you just want to like rub your cheek up against, and stuff like that. So the second house, to summarize like the overall kind of stuff, represents the things that sustain us, can represent money, can represent us to a certain extent our sensuality, and how we represent our sensuality in material items. So another way to break it down would be the keywords of material items, finances, and senses, or sustainability. Would be those kind of main key terms or phrases to use when talking about the second house. So some examples that I have are a few charts of famous people. And so I wanted to talk about Donald Trump's chart because he is, I don't want to use the word icon, but just throughout my entire life, my entire 24 years, he's been known as this rich guy. And so I was like, okay, I want to see what in his chart, in his second house, since the second house is like the house of riches, it can be finances and comfort and stuff like that. What in his chart is like making him seem this way? So I was curious. So his second house seems to be, actually, majority, so ruled by Libra, mainly. And this is in the Placidus style of astrology, Placidus system, which I think is the most accurate for his representation right now. So his second house being ruled by Libra is quite interesting, because Libra is also a sister sign to Taurus. They're ruled by Venus as well. But the Libra can be a little bit more ostentatious. It can be a little bit more flirty and selfish in some ways, although Libras are also known for creating balance and stuff. But Donald Trump's second house being ruled by Libra kind of represents this need for him to be a little bit ostentatious. And like, I remember I saw a clip or something when he first was elected president of like his house, or Melania's house, and it was just like really lavish, and I was really confused by like the decor that was chosen and stuff like that. So, and that could show up like just in different cycles in his life, but also Libra being like the sign of relationships shows that like kind of that his finances and stuff, like either like he uses his finances as a way to like flirt with people. Like it kind of shows that connection that we've seen so much in his rhetoric of like using money to get people to like him, or using money to create relationships, and using that advantage or whatever. Like you get what I'm saying, I assume. And what's really interesting is that in the second house he has Jupiter at 17 degrees Libra, but he also has Neptune at 5 degrees Libra. And so what this says to me is that he's created so many illusions around his stability and financial structure and what sustains him, and it's all going to shit. No. And Jupiter's also there, which makes it seem like he's getting like lucky at first. So like it kind of represents like almost his fall from grace in a way, where in the beginning of his life he was able to actually be seen as like a mogul and like impressive because of his business like structure, but now it's gone like a little bit too far for some people, or he's being really kind of like dethroned within the public right now, right? So I think that shows an example of this, because Neptune represents illusions and stuff like that, like the kind of things we talk ourselves into or illusions that we create for ourselves, which I think is interesting. And right now, where Neptune is, if I'm not mistaken, is at a weird aspect for his Libra, and it'll be opposing soon. So yeah, so he has some second house stuff going on for sure. But yeah, so that's just one example. Within the second house in his chart, it really shows how he uses the second house and money and sustainability to create relationships, or to help benefit, like he uses those relationships with people to help benefit his financial standing or stability, or whatever he relates to the second house, like having material items, having a presidency. I don't know. The second person I chose was Ellen DeGeneres, just because I thought that her financial stuff is kind of controversial, because she is very, she has her own little Ellen empire, and she's still like pretty privileged. I realize both of these people that I'm talking about are white people. So if anyone has any people's charts that they want me to look at for the second house and comment on, or for the third house, which I'll do next month, feel free to let me know, and then I can get into them, like specifically any people of color or any other like women or gay people of the LGBT community. I'd love to also discuss them. These are just like the people that I had off the top of my head. Of course, Ellen is part of the LGBT community, but going back on what I was saying, I still think it's important to talk about like the privilege of white people, because there's stuff going on with her and the ex-president, President Bush. I don't know, I wasn't really looking too much into it, but if you're an American and know what I'm talking about and this offends you, I'm sorry. Anyways, so what was I talking about? So Ellen's chart I thought was interesting, because yeah, again, she has this little empire for herself, but she also is known for being pretty charitable and philanthropic. That's how I'm saying that word properly. And her second house really does kind of show that off. So in this style, in the Placidus style chart, her second house is like, it's divided almost halfway exactly between Capricorn and Aquarius. So I thought that was really cool. It can really show off some of these things that I'm talking about. So having the second house in Capricorn would kind of identify her energies as like again, like successful, ambitious, wanting to have like a wealthy lifestyle or a successful lifestyle, where she's able to again just afford everything she needs. Capricorns are very ambitious, so this is definitely she's a great representation of this energy, where it's like working your way up the ladder and working hard and overcoming obstacles, which she has, which is really cool, because the Capricorn's the mountain goat, so they have this innate nature within them, but it does take them a while to get to their successes. Like she did go through some major struggles and stuff like that, so I think that's a pretty cool representation of that. And then the other half to that is her second house being partially ruled by Aquarius, and Aquarius is this like rebel, is this representation of going against the norm or the expected, and speaking for people who don't have a voice, maybe being like a bit of an observer of the world, and not, yeah, not necessarily doing what's expected, but also being very like what's another word aside from rebellious? It's a little bit more like surprising, I want to say. So with the second house representing that, like, that would show more of her like, oh, the government has done you wrong, I'm gonna give you this money, or you did something amazing for the world, I'm gonna give you this, or, and just like, yeah, like stuff like that. Like her prizes on her shows or her charity work is sometimes really interesting. So, and that would be a little bit of the Aquarius coming out, but also the Aquarius and Capricorn really working together, and using her material items, or like financial her financial stating to create stability for others. But in a way, by doing that, it's also creating more sustainability for her career, because if she wasn't giving these things, like there's probably other stuff in her chart that says she's a great person and stuff like that, because I love Ellen, but it probably also is part of this idea of like, okay, I'm ambitious, but now I have to give back, and like this kind of balance of everything between being successful but not being a dick about it is just like the kind of overall statement I feel like giving. But yeah, her sun is also in the second house, and that's why it's such a prominent thing. That's probably why she was one of the first people I thought about, was because her sun rules the second house as well. So that means that these are kind of things that can be a little bit more shown sometimes. Like that's how I see it in modern astrology. However, I was also taught something interesting where, oh no, I guess it's not within the degrees, so never mind. But yeah, so okay, so I am gonna say what I learned. So I learned that if something is under the sun by 15 degrees, it isn't as prominently shown in the real world, but you can see it in its chart. So in Ellen's chart, the Capricorn side of her second house is within those 15 degrees. And some people might not see her as that ambitious side all the time, and maybe the underlying kind of business aspect of some of her philanthropic pursuits or charitable pursuits. But that was scary. There was like a big bump. Anyways, but the other side of the sun where things are shining is the more Aquarius, exciting, and like rebellious nature of her second house, which would be how she chooses to spend her money and how she chooses to kind of like live her life. Like everyone's pretty attracted to Ellen's second house materials. Even like a few other second house things I can think of with Ellen is like the fact that she even has like her own clothing line and stuff like that, that people are like, oh, these are good underwear or something. But also on her, she, like, her 50th, 60th birthday was like going to see some monkeys that were extinct or something, and I remember just eating it up, being like, what a great way to like celebrate a birthday. But really it was like, oh, like, but really like there was some other, like I saw in a review of her stand-up thing that it was like, oh, but of course, like, because her stand-up comedy, I hope I'm not too rambly right now, but her stand-up comedy routine was actually discussing how she's still relatable, and she was kind of like having this commentary on how she is rich but still relatable. And so it was interesting that that came out, and now I'm talking about this where she really revealed that other side to herself, where it's like, is she relatable or is she not? Is she like, yeah, she's saying she's just like the rest of us, but she's also like the rest of them. And when we're talking about like rich versus regular, but that was really, really interesting. And I think that's just a really good example of this Capricorn Aquarius in her second house and where it comes out And the second house is still very much, as you can see through what I've been talking about, is the second house is very much something that other people can see. Other people are able to make judgments about it. And it's what you show. Where another house that is concerned with money, the eighth house, is more of a private money house and things that like you wouldn't really be able to tell about or visually see when talking to someone or looking at their life. Like I have no idea that Ellen's eighth house is like, for example, Ellen's eighth house is ruled by Cancer, so that would suggest that maybe she helps fund some of her family's things, maybe people close to her when they're sick, like she helps them with their bills and like stuff like that. There might be this other side to Ellen, or maybe she even used to have some loans, like her family used to loan her money, maybe. That would be something with the eighth house. But yeah, anyways, so I hope that kind of helped create like a little brief, deeper understanding of the second house, where it's, to summarize, it's something that you can visually see in people's lives, a little bit more of a tangible visual understanding. It represents their material world, their financial world, and how they create sustainability or stability. And it can also be connected to pleasure senses and how they receive pleasure, what they in more of a material way, in more of a sense way of their senses, not so much like sexuality pleasure. So yeah, hope that was fun and informative for you guys. I guess this was pretty quick. I think in my last one, in the first house episode, I might have went through the houses and what they were, when they were in each sign, but I think that I get too tired when I talk about that. But if you wanted to know about your houses, you can totally book a reading with me. My website is terriblebutgreat.astrology.com. I'll put the link under this too. But yeah, feel free to comment or message me, and I'll make the third house video, should be out in December.